Hi there folks, and welcome to the QLab 5 live stream Q&A session. My name is Sam and I work for Figure 53 on QLab. I do design work and I write the manual and I teach QLab classes and I do Q&A live streams like this one. Today we're going to be talking about QLab 5, which was released just last week, and I'm going to do a little demonstration about what QLab 5 brings to the table, but mostly the purpose of this session is to do Q&A with you. So please do put your questions in the comments. I will be looking down and off camera at the window I have here where the chat is, and that's where I'll look and answer your questions. In case this is a new format for you, there is a lag time in the stream of about 20 seconds. It's variable, so if you ask a question and it seems like I have no idea that you just asked it, the reason for that is that I don't have any idea that you just asked it for a few minutes. So, without further ado, this is QLab 5. What I've got set up here, you're looking at a QLab 5 workspace window on the left side of my screen, and then an Audition output window on the right side of my screen. I've set QLab 5 to Audition mode, in which video cues play into the window on my screen instead of out to wherever they're supposed to go, such as a projector or an LED wall or a screen of some kind. So that way I can show you both what QLab looks like here and then what output would be shown to your audience over on this side. So without further ado, away I go, and the time to start asking questions begins now, so feel free anytime. So I like to think about the things that are new in QLab 5 in sort of a few broad categories. And the broad categories essentially are these: the video engine, the patching infrastructure, a set of quality of life improvements, some changes to queuing options and new tools, audition mode, and networking and collaboration. And so we'll talk about each of these sets of features separately. But again, don't feel like you have to restrict your question to the section that we're talking about at that particular moment. Anything that occurs to you is a good question to ask any old time. So the video engine is sort of the most obviously new piece of QLab 5. It's been rewritten entirely using Metal, which is Apple's new graphics framework. Metal is very, very impressive, and Apple Silicon Macs particularly make great use of the changes in Metal to realize some real performance improvements. So a Mac with Apple Silicon especially, but any Mac, will see generally better performance out of QLab 5 than QLab 4 for a similar set of video tasks, particularly if the video media that you're using is encoded as ProRes, which is something that we recommend anyway, and we can talk more about that later if you like. The Metal video engine also gives us better live video effects and better efficiency, processor efficiency running them, and lets us render multiple video effects per cue. Lets us render blend modes as well. So we have here a video cue with two text cues overlaid that have different blend modes set. So previously, QLab was just opacity was the only compositing tool available to you, but now we have a whole set of blend modes which are all offered to us by Metal. I said multiple video effects before I showed it to you, but here video effects on a cue can be chained sequentially. They render in order, so the cue that you're seeing an example of here is zoom blurred first, and then Gabor gradients are applied after. I don't really know what Gabor gradients means, but I looked at it and it looks cool, so if it looks like the thing you need, then that's the effect to use. So the order matters, right? So this one is blurred first and then gradiented. If you dragged the Gabor gradients above the zoom blur, then it would do the gradient effect first and then zoom blur the result of that. And we have our first question in the chat. Are there any plans to make QLab Remote app for Samsung tablets for Android? The answer is no. The reason for that, in short, is that we are a shop full of Apple ecosystem developers. None of us know anything about writing Android apps, or what we do know is minimal compared to what we know about writing Apple apps. And also the same, my favorite question, will you ever write QLab for Windows, is really the same question as this, right? The answer is that I can count all the configurations of iOS devices that can run QLab remote, and therefore I have a good chance at being able to troubleshoot a problem that you're having with your iOS device. If we open the door to Android, that goes out the window. There are so many Android versions. There are so many versions of Android hardware. That hardware supports a variety of different versions of various like low-level APIs. So it just becomes a very confusing place to develop software, a very challenging place. So we're sticking to iOS for remote and macOS for QLab. Okay, video effects, also new to QLab 5. This isn't directly because of Metal, but alongside it, we have NDI input and output. So here I have my iPhone. It's running a piece of software called NDI HX Camera. And here is a camera cue which shows that NDI feed live, wireless, over the local network here. NDI is built into a lot of video hardware and other video software these days, and it's sort of like a spiffier and broader application of something like Siphon. Sorry, I stumbled on that, but you get the picture. We have another question. I noticed I needed to update my QLab 4 license to QLab 5, but my QLab Remote license does not need to be updated. QLab Remote does not have a license per se. The app is the app. The way that Apple sets the rules for the App Store is that we can either update an app and continue to allow people to use the update for free, or we could create a new in-app purchase if we wanted to charge again for an update, or we could create a completely new version of the app and put that on sale. So what we've done is we've just elected to update QLab Remote. So indeed, at Spencer, as you ask, all you need to do is make sure you're updated to the most recent version of QLab Remote. And if you already bought the in-app purchases in QLab Remote, they will carry over. If you have not yet bought the in-app purchases, you can buy them for the same price as you ever could. And QLab Remote continues to work with QLab 4 as well as with QLab 5. Rob asks, can you speak more to the benefits of using ProRes files as opposed to other types? What if my designers are building other video extensions? I absolutely can. So the long and short of it is that QLab uses Apple's built-in video frameworks to render video to the screen. So whatever Apple's frameworks support is what QLab supports. We support, therefore, ProRes, H.264 and H.265 now, PhotoJPEG. There are a couple of other formats that I'm not actually familiar with. And then we also, on top of that, built in support for HAP and HAP Alpha, which are other codecs that are designed mostly for live media use. And in our testing, we found that ProRes 422 Proxy, which is the lowest data rate version of the ProRes family of codecs, it looks very good compared to its data rate. So it's just sort of subjectively speaking, the picture quality is good compared to its data rate. And the file sizes are large because the compression is low. And so decoding a ProRes file takes much less processing power than decoding other formats. And as a result, for live playback, it basically puts QLab, allows QLab to use, to put its best foot forward. Less work is spent decoding the video file, more work is spent rendering it and doing whatever you want to do to it. So ProRes is our recommended codec for that reason. All the other codecs that are supported, and I'm not saying you shouldn't use them, but to Rob's point, my recommendation is that your designers should be encouraged to output ProRes 422 proxy as a first step. And if they don't like what they see, try ProRes 422 LT, which is one step up in data rate and therefore one step up in picture quality. Practically speaking, I've found that the deficiencies of the 422 LT codec are almost never visible in real-world settings in a theatrical context. You might be able to see the differences on a high-quality monitor. In fact, you will be able to see the differences. But a lot of times, folks are projecting onto a cyc. A cyc is a soft object, so your razor-sharp, perfect lines render as a little bit fuzzy because they're projecting onto a surface that is literally a little bit fuzzy. So ProRes 422 proxy is almost always fine. LT is fine for those most of the cases in which it's not. And then ProRes 4444, which is a terrible name, that's 4 fours, is the codec that we recommend if you need alpha, which is alpha channel support, which is transparency in your video. If your designers are using other video types and they're reticent to try using ProRes, I encourage you to have them just output a sample file and try it in your system setup. And if it works well, go in health, use that format. But if you're having performance difficulty, switching to ProRes 422 proxy or LT is the best first step. It's the simplest thing you can do to try to improve a performance problem with video playback. Rob, please let me know if that answered your question or not. Rolf asks, NDI sources with audio only show as mono, and the main level is set to 0 by default in version 501. Any chance of supporting stereo in the upcoming versions? I'll address the second half of your comment first. The main level is set to 0 by default. That is true, and that is on purpose. And the reason for that is a person who is not expecting audio in an NDI feed could potentially run a camera cue without realizing that audio is coming through. And perhaps that audio would be coming through very loud. And perhaps it's routing to a place that the person who's running the cue is not aware is unmuted. And so we set the default audio level for camera cues to silent in order to prevent an accident that could hurt someone's ears or blow out a speaker or cause any kind of live audio catastrophe. You can change the defaults if you go to workspace settings, which you get to by hitting the gear, and go to templates, to cue templates, to camera cues, and to levels. You can set this main level anywhere you like. We set it to silent so that a person who doesn't have any reason to know about this doesn't accidentally get themselves in audible trouble. But if you know what you're doing and you know what the consequences are, you can set this to any other number and away you go. As to the question of mono versus stereo, I don't believe that we deliberately block multiple channels of audio. So that's something for us to check and get back to you on. It's possible that you are not totally familiar with this piece of the settings puzzle, so let me go through that briefly. I've got a camera cue here selected that is using an NDI source for video. Callisto is the name of my cell phone, and so it automatically appears here with the name of the cell phone and the name of the software. The audio input that is associated also automatically comes through, and I think, yeah, so here I choose the number of channels that I want to bring in to this cue. So if you want a stereo input, you switch that to 2. And then here shows the number of channels being sent. I see only one channel being sent by this NDI source. So that means that this NDI source is only sending mono audio, which makes sense because there's only one microphone on the phone. It is conceivable that another NDI device might send multiple sources. I believe NDI supports up to 16 channels of audio. So if you're finding that this drop-down box only ever says 1 and never says a greater number, even though you're certain that your NDI feed has more channels of audio, then that's something for us to look into, and it is not a deliberate limitation on our part at this time. So that's the answer with NDI audio channels. Rob's got another question. I did answer your question. Great. Thank you, Rob. You're welcome. But you have another question. Assuming you're not able to get your administrator to upgrade to QLab 5, is ProRes the best for QLab 4 as well? Yes, it is. And in fact, it is even more distinctly advantageous in QLab 4. Or rather, that's not true, is it? It is more distinctly advantageous if you're using an Intel Mac. The performance behavior between different codecs is leveled out a little bit on Apple Silicon. But yes, the answer is anyway, ProRes 422 proxy is our recommended codec for QLab 4 and QLab 5. Okay, I've caught up to the questions, so I'm going to plow on with the little lecture component, and folks can jump in with questions anytime, like you have already. We've already sort of spilled the beans on this particular tidbit, but camera cues can now accept audio input. So if you have either an independent audio device, like an audio interface with a microphone plugged in, you can patch that into a camera cue, and then when the camera cue comes up, it has sort of an embedded mic cue. So this means that camera cues in QLab now are their own live mic cue, whereas previously you had to have a separate camera cue and mic cue. Let's see here, hang on one second. I have done something interesting to my cues from jumping around and showing you things. So camera cues, yes, have built-in audio input. For camera cues which use an NDI source, they automatically map to the NDI, the audio channels of that NDI source. That's something we're looking at expanding upon, but for now, if you use a camera cue with NDI video in, it automatically grabs the NDI audio channels attached to that same NDI feed. And we have a question. Hello from Stockholm. Hello, Stockholm. Are there any plans on adding anti-aliasing on the stage level as well? We'll be able to get smoother edges on warps. I thought that we have anti-aliasing at the stage level now, but perhaps we only have it at the cue level. Either my answer is we already have that, and as I believe, but maybe I'm wrong, or we would like to add that. So the answer to your question is I hope so, but I have no further information about it right now. Okay, patching infrastructure is the next fundamental change I want to talk about. So in QLab 4, you had 8 audio patches for getting audio out of QLab to the world. And you had 8 audio patches for audio cues, and then you had 8 separate audio patches for mic cues. And then you had 8 audio patches, or 8 mic patches for getting audio into QLab. You had 8 MIDI patches coming in and out. In QLab 5, we now have an unlimited number of patches. So any number of patches that you need is the number that you create. You're looking right now at an example of audio patches. So this screenshot shows 3 audio patches, which are unnamed. One of them is using the system default output. So that's another addition, which is whatever the Mac OS is set to use. So if I open system settings and go to audio, or sound, excuse me, and choose output and choose a device. Here I'm airplaying to a screen so that I can see what I'm showing you. That is currently the system device, the system output device. So inside QLab, when I go to audio and audio outputs, this patch, system output, is using that same device. If I switch what audio device my computer is using to, say, my audio interface, this will automatically follow. I have two other patches set up here. So we have the MacBook Pro's built-in speakers, we have Black Hole. I can create any number of patches that I like, and critically, if more than one patch uses the same audio device, I can configure each patch differently. So I could have, this is something that I do a lot, I can have two patches, both using Dante. One routes to all my speakers in my theater, but then the second only routes to, say, a headphone amplifier on my tech table. And I can then route cues just to my headphone amplifier at my tech table using the Dante routing in that second patch if I want. More commentary, jumping back to the Q&A. Rolf reports that stereo NDI source does indeed provide two channels. Only one is set by default. Switching to two channels did the trick, so success there. And Andy, hello Andy. Andy says, how does NDI performance compare to native GPU video outputs? And is there any improvement in SDI output via Blackmagic compared to V4? Great questions. The answer is unfortunately a little fuzzy. I have not done extensive NDI video testing performance-wise, but I have across the street in the Voxel, which is Figure 53's test theater, we have been sent a high-performance switch, and we have a Mac Studio with a M1 Max configuration and another Mac Studio with an M1 Ultra. So one of the things I want to do this week is do a test with this really good switch, where the switch is probably not the limiting factor. How many streams of NDI output can I get on an M1 Max versus an M1 Studio versus an older Intel Mac before I see performance issues? It's tricky to test. NDI is slippery, and a lot of different variables, as I'm sure you know, can affect NDI performance. So it's hard to isolate it down to say it's just the Mac that I'm testing the limitations of. That's bad grammar, but I hope you understand what I mean. So I'm hoping to get a good test on that this week. But in short, I find that NDI performs relatively well. It seems to get better performance than Blackmagic outputs, but not quite as good performance as native GPU outputs. That's just feels like difference though, and it's not scientific yet. Of course, it's different because a built-in GPU has a very specific and hard limit on the number of screens, whereas NDI does not have a specific and hard limit. So it's mushy, and I don't have a great answer for you yet. Fortunately, the second question you asked, is there any improvement in SDI output via Blackmagic compared to V4? I can say yes, there is. Blackmagic devices output, Blackmagic device output performs better in V5 than in V4. It's hard to say how much better because all of my testing in V5 has been on an Apple Silicon Mac. I ran 16 full HD 60 frames per second videos out of my M1 Max MacBook to my Blackmagic card in a Sonnet Thunderbolt 3 chassis. I took these videos, they were full HD, I shrunk them down to quarter screen and put them, 4 of them, and then outputted to all 4 outputs on my Blackmagic card, and I didn't see any drop frames. So that is 32. The M1 Studio across the street, we did a test and ran twice as many HD videos without frame drops as far as we could tell. So the performance is impressive. Your mileage may vary. There are a lot of variables, a lot of things change. And again, a lot of this is because V5 is better, and a lot of this is because Apple Silicon is better. Much, 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 much better than even the best Intel performance. So there's a combination going on. Okay, patches. We were in patches. So yeah, I can create as many output patches as I like, and I can assign multiple patches to the same device and configure them differently. And this is true for audio outputs, which are combined mic cues and audio cues now use the same set of audio outputs. Audio inputs, I can likewise have as many as I like. Network patches, as many as I like. MIDI patches, as many as I like. And MIDI, network, and audio patches are all now visually the same. They sort of look the same, they behave the same. You can also do this groovy thing. I'm going to reveal my desktop a little bit so that I can take these two, select them, and drag them to the desktop where they become, the file showed in a strange place, but here it is. This should be right here on the screen, but the placement of the icon. Anyway, I can drag patches out of here onto the desktop and they become a QLab settings file, which I can then drag back in to this workspace or to another workspace, and they get imported. I can drag them in between workspaces. So if I have two open workspaces and I configured a patch here that I really like how I did it, just drag it into this workspace and presto, copied and pasted. We have another question. Regarding M1 and M2, any performance changes between those? M2 is, according to Apple people, a budget CPU versus the M1 Max and Pro. Any recommendations regarding the M2 usage for QLab? The answer is that the M2 is, so for those of you, and the M1 Max, then the M1 Ultra. It's the same M1 core, but built into more sophisticated unit. Then they introduced the M2. The M2 is analogous to the M1. It's the same format, but the M2 is it's between 10 and 30% faster at any given task than the M1. The M1 Pro, Max, and Ultra, as of right now, outperform the M2. But an M1 to M2 direct comparison, the M2 is undeniably better. The M2 and the M1, my audio has been constantly cutting out and my video became choppy since a few minutes ago. Thank you for that, Aaron. Let's figure out what's going on. I'm going to try lowering the data rate out of the stream and I'll be right back. Or it might change live. I'm not actually going anywhere, but I'm going to adjust the settings. Okay, I've lowered the data rate. Please let me know if the audio and stream are generally more stable or not. We have a strong network connection here and a very high quality Wi-Fi router, but even so, things are weird and streaming is a challenge. So yeah, let me know if this works better. Where are we? Back to the Q&A. Is there any way to lock settings in QLab with a password or in general, specifically the text color settings in edit mode? Our actor changes it to black and blames me all the time. So I'm not exactly sure what you mean by text color settings. If I assume you mean of a text queue, when you select a text queue and go to the text field, here you can change the color. The answer is there is no way to lock settings in QLab, but if you switch your workspace to show mode down here, that prevents accidental editing of queues. We have a philosophy about QLab, which is this. Thing one, if anyone has physical access to a computer and they're really intent on making mischief, they will be able to make mischief whether or not QLab has a password. Thing two, if we add any kind of password protection to QLab, that increases the chance that someone will forget the password and be stuck in show conditions at some point, perhaps on tour, perhaps out of cell service. So for that, we feel like the nature of the problems that can be introduced by adding a password lock is more dire than the nature of the protections that can be introduced by adding a password. Reasonable people may differ. This is just an opinion. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. This is our opinion. So we have not added a password lock and we do not intend to add a password lock. I do encourage you to use show mode, and I also encourage you to tell your actor that their job is not to edit queues or change settings. Their job is to run the show. And if they are changing settings when they're not supposed to be, that's not really a technical problem. That is a personnel problem. And that is something that a password cannot solve, in my opinion. Does QLab run fine on the Ventura beta? I am already running Ventura and there's no way to go back. QLab 4 works fine. I do not know. and we do not know anything about the Ventura beta. We do not recommend using it. We certainly do not recommend using it in a show conditions. And it is our policy to support the current public release of macOS, or any public release of macOS. So we don't know much about the macOS beta. Last I heard, there was a show-stopping issue with Ventura, but I believe that one of our developers addressed it, and I don't know if that fix went into 5.01, which is the current version of QLab 5, or not. How's my stream stability? Are people hearing me okay? Has the video become unacceptably choppy, or is it acceptable? Please do let me know in the chat, particularly Aaron M. Seablade reports an improvement. That's great. Thank you, settings. Stream works fine. Thank you, everybody, for helping out. Okie dokie. Nicholas says, thank you for the M1 and M2. Blind Eyes answers another person. Ta-ta-ta-da-ta-da. Okay, great. Blind Eye says, I would like to, i.e. tell the actor not to edit things, but the artist says no because he has to type live and only live, and latency, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, QLab is on stage. It seems to me, Blind Eye 1995, like you have a unique situation, and I think that if you write to support@figure53.com and explain the situation, we probably could help you build some tools in QLab using existing QLab tools to make it possible for your actor to get what they need without accidentally changing what they shouldn't change. I encourage you very much to write in. I think that would be a fun challenge to help you figure that out. And Siobhan, one of our fabulous developers, says, yes, the Ventura fix went into 5.0, but like you said, wait for the 0.1 release, right? Okay, great. So the answer to the person who said, how does QLab 5 run on Ventura betas right now is we believe technically it's working fine, but we still think you shouldn't. And also when Ventura comes out, we recommend waiting until Apple releases at least one update to Ventura before you adopt it. Generally speaking, Apple is up against the wall with the release of a new OS, usually because it coincides with hardware releases. So if you wait till the .01 update to that macOS release, you're likely to see dramatic improvements to stability. Now folks are mostly talking about poor Blind Eye 1995's complicated situation. And I am going to leave that alone for now and encourage that you write to support. But also, feel free to keep helping each other out also in the stream. Okay, where are we? We were talking about patching infrastructure. We looked at audio patches, network patches. Likewise, here we have lots of different network patches. Network patching is also more complicatedly advanced in QLab 5, and I'll talk more about that later, but the short version is we've built in the OSC libraries of a number of other programs and devices that folks commonly use with QLab, which hopefully makes it a lot easier to interoperate with those devices via OSC because you don't have to go look up in the manual, wait a minute, how do I tell EOS to run a queue? How do I tell Acoustics Lisa to pan a sound? It's just all built into QLab, so I'll show that in a little bit. Okay, the quality of life improvements that we talked about. We have a question now. I saw on Twitter that you use a Stream Deck. Any plans for native support? No plans. Stream Deck does what they do, and we found that using just the Stream Deck software itself and using BitFocus Companion are two great options. The Stream Deck's really hackable, and we encourage you to hack on it, but building native support for Stream Deck into QLab to us feels like favoring a specific device that doesn't show any real promise over other similar devices. I happen to be using a Stream Deck. I like the Stream Deck. Many people like the Stream Deck, but there's nothing about the Stream Deck that makes it like the world's best QLab controller, so much so that we feel necessary to build control in. That's not a dig at Stream Deck. Stream Decks are great. So are other devices. I love everything and everybody. And that's just where we are. We have a limited amount of energy that we can put into things. And we'd like to put energy into things that help the greatest number of QLab users and productive place to put all of our developer energy. Or it is got a different UI design, and it's got a little bit more elaborate power, so you can do more complicated things relatively easily, but it is sort of the same root idea. Eric asks, are there any QLab specific controllers on the horizon for Figure 53? Eric, if what you mean is, are we planning to release any hardware ourselves? The answer is, we are not planning to release any hardware right now. We have our hands full writing the software. And there are a couple of other folks who make QLab related hardware. To take off my Figure 53 hat and just be myself for a minute, I make QLab controllers myself, and I can speak first-handedly that it is a full and complete challenge, and something that we're just not ready to diffuse our efforts just yet. And now back with the Figure 53 hat. Okie dokie. What else are we hearing in the stream? Stream choking here and there again. Okay, thank you. I've got a lot of feedback about when the stream is choking, and I'm sorry about that, but it looks like it's stabilized once more. Okay, we're in the quality of life improvements department. Carts. For those of you who use carts, hopefully you will recognize these as things that are asked for relatively frequently. First of all, carts can now be configured any size from 1 by 1 up to 10 by 10 rows and columns. That's something that used to be fixed in only certain configurations, but now we've made it fully flexible up to 10 by 10 down to 1 by 1. We also have a small, medium, and large font size for Q carts, as similar to how we had for Q lists. And Q cart buttons themselves show a bit more information than they used to. So we have here Cheer Up Hamlet showing its pre-wait time about to count down, and the Q progress bar in the Q cart button is more prominently visible. Another quality of life improvement is that live meters now work in Q audio effects. Used to be that audio effects meters only worked if they were in QLab on the Q outputs, but now they work in any context. Chris Ashworth figured out a sneaky thing, how to do it, and it works. We know finally, yes, we're very happy about it. Negative load to time. So if you may or may not know already that the load to time tool lets you type a number, say, okay, load the selected Q to 1 minute, but you could always do this as well. By typing a negative number, you load that many seconds back from the end. So when I work in dance a lot, when the choreographer says, can we have the last 30 seconds of that number, please? I can select the cue, load to time -30, enter, bada boom. We now can also do that in load queues and with OSC messages, which previously were not able to use negative load. So now a load queue can use -12. A load at message, OSC message, can use a negative number as well. And that should make it easier to use that. Doc says, Chris Ashworth figured out a sneaky thing equals every great feature on QLab. Basically true, although sometimes Siobhan, Chad, Brent, or Christopher figured out a sneaky thing. And so is a group of folks figuring out sneaky things, but it is a small group. All right, another quality of life type improvement. We have new light definitions from new friends. So we have all of these lighting manufacturers are new to QLab's library, and we've also increased the number of lights from our pre-existing friends. We have, this slide is out of date. We have about 1,400 fixtures in the QLab lighting library, and more coming whenever we encounter them. It's a big job making these. It's not particularly difficult, but it's time consuming. If you find a light out there that you use all the time that you want added to the library, let us know about it. Many of the new lights from our old friends in this list were just lights someone asked for once or twice. And so we put those into the public release. The new light definitions from new friends also involved requests from folks, and also lights that we found that we just thought like, yeah, those should go in. Question from Aaron about font size. Any chance of allowing us to fully customize fonts and sizes completely in a future update to cater for users with accessibility needs? That is, Apple does a lot to make accessibility possible in macOS, and I admire that. And also, it could be more, and it is a challenge. Fully customizing the fonts in QLab is actually an enormous challenge. We have implemented a lot more accessibility hooks under the covers. QLab supports high contrast mode, as well as what are they called? UI label descriptions. So there's much more support for Braille readers, screen readers, and assorted low vision accommodations on the Mac. But there's more to do. Font size is one of them. Right now, we recommend that folks who have serious font size related limitations to approach that by changing the resolution of the screen that they're using QLab on, and use a lower res screen, which will result in everything being blown up. I know it's not perfect. It's better than nothing, I hope. Alana Jacoby, hello, asks, speaking of customization, is there anything you may or may not wish to share about any new Q colors that may or may not exist? There are new Q colors. I'll talk about this. I'll talk about when a Q is selected. You can go to the Basics tab and change its highlight color from the gray dot, which means no specific color, to red, orange, green, blue, or purple. You have here an example of a green Q. And now in QLab 5, you can set Qs to have their color shown either always, before they're run, or after they're run. So that can help you mark Qs as not yet run, or yes, I've run this Q. And there are other Q colors. There are a number of other Q colors, which can be found through some various spelunking. If you Google certain other colors may be valid, I think you'll find some investigation by Alex Sparks, who did some sneaky business and found out some things that Alana is alluding to in the chat right now. So how about that? Whole of QLab's interface. Because if what you're saying is that small, medium, and large in the Q list is insufficient, relatively easy to do, and we can do that. If what you're asking about, though, is the font size of the rest of the interface of QLab, like and I see now that my stream just dropped out and just came back. Yeah, I am sorry about the internet. I mean, that's maybe like a very true statement about this century, right? I'm sorry about the internet. But I am sorry specifically about the internet problems that this stream is experiencing. Frustratingly enough, I look in the YouTube analysis page and it says, oh yeah, everything's fine. Stream is healthy, no problem. So I don't know what to say. I mean, I do too. Aaron asked me to repeat the answer about the fonts, and I'm happy to do that. So here, I'm gonna lower the bitrate even more. And hopefully that will make a difference. Hopefully it will not spoil the picture or audio quality too much. So the question about the fonts. If, Aaron, your question is only relating to the size of the text up here in the Q list, if you want bigger fonts here than QLab's built-in small, medium, large, that's not that hard to do, and we can certainly explore doing that pretty easily if that's something that folks want. And please write into support@figure53.com and say so. But if you're talking about the size of this text down here, that's a much more challenging thing, and it's something that we can explore doing over time in the future. But my immediate answer to this is you have to lower the resolution of your screen in order to increase the size of this text. And I'm sorry about that. I recognize that QLab is not the most accessible piece of software, and it's an enormous challenge, and it's one that we should continue to work on, and we do continue to work on, and will continue to work on. And the more that you folks guide us in telling us what accessibility concerns are the most important ones, the more likely we are to be able to address those concerns first. So please do keep us posted about your accessibility concerns and needs in QLab. Alrighty, moving onward, as there are no pending questions right now in the chat. Oh dear, oh bother. You stop time code capture. Okay, so in the triggers tab of a queue, you always were able to set a timecode trigger manually. You are now able to wait for the appropriate timecode moment and then click capture. And when there is incoming timecode, that moment of timecode will be captured as the trigger for that queue. We also have an OSC and AppleScript version of this command. So /q/selected/capture timecode will capture incoming timecode and apply that to the selected queue's timecode trigger, so you can create a hotkey that grabs timecode and stamps that queue. Watch the QLab manual tutorials area for a timecode tools tutorial, which is forthcoming in the next couple of months. Okay, the next quality of life improvement, the file target search tool. So here we have an example of, I'm sorry, I see a note here. Looks like changing the stream settings has wiped the timeline of the stream up until the last minute. Hopefully the recording will still be of the full stream. I also hope so. YouTube is doing the recording, so I don't know what the answer is. It's possible that this stream will be sort of a bust, in which case I will just record myself doing a talk without the Q&A of the features that we're running down in this queue list. So at least we'll have that online. YouTube is a hassle. What can I say? I apologize for the internet, and YouTube is a hassle. Great. More truisms coming from me today. Okie dokie. File target search tool. So I don't know if any of you have had this problem. You take a QLab workspace, you bundle it up, you put it onto a new computer, you open it up. All your audio files or video files are there. You see them, but QLab does not see them. What to do? Well, now, if you have a file, a queue that's missing its file, select it, go to the Tools menu. Aaron suggests native YouTube output in QLab. Haha, no way. No, thank you. The last thing I need in my life is more interacting with YouTube. No, sorry, that's me speaking personally. I think direct output to YouTube from QLab is, shall I call it niche? And I'm going to say it would be low on the list. If people really, really want this and think there's a compelling argument, by all means, write to us and tell us about it. Please do. Anyway, queue with the broken file target. I select the queue, I go to the Tools menu, and I see Open File Target Search Tool. And now this new window opens. Locate replacement file targets. So here's the broken queue. Here's where it last saw its target file. But I'm going to ask it to look in a folder. So just to be clear, I clicked look in folder. I clicked in this rectangle. I'm going to the folder where I know the audio is. Welcome to QLab Livestream. Search selected folder. It found a replacement file target. Update selected file targets, and the problem is solved. If you have lots of queues whose target files are in that same folder, you can solve them all at once, or you can go through one by one, say yes, 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 no, 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 yes, no, yes, no, or so forth. How do you reset queues with before and after action colors? Great question. You can reset queues by using the, where is it? Reset queue type here. So this queue, a reset queue will reset its target. If you open the sidebar and look in the top area here, that button resets all queues in the workspace. It also stops all queues that are currently running. And then there's also, there are both AppleScript and OSC commands to reset a queue. So the reset queue, AppleScript, OSC, or the reset all button in the sidebar is how to reset a queue. Okay, so moving right along. Queuing improvements. You bet, Spencer. Zero count slices. So this is something folks have been asking for a while. Here's an audio cue that has a long intro. Here, we'll do the demo like this. So this, we have one measure of start, another M, or by clicking Add Slice. But then you can edit the slice count to 0. And now when you run the queue, it just skips that slice over. It's a sample accurate skip every single time. No need to worry. Is the stream? All right. If you can see and hear me now, would you please write OK in the chat? I'm looking at the demo feed that YouTube sends me back. Okay, everyone said okay. That's great. The demo feed that that YouTube shows me in the like YouTube Studio window. Okay, Aaron says my music demo got interrupted. That's great. Thanks everybody. Thanks for letting me know. The demo feed looks like it's like 20 minutes behind. So I really am not sure what's going on. But I would say that it's most likely Comcast's fault, next most likely YouTube's fault, next most likely is OBS's fault, and next most likely is my fault. But those are all tight, really tight together, odds-wise. So it really could be any of those people. I don't want to, I just don't want to divest myself of blame. That's all I'm saying. Alrighty. Zero count slices are sample accurate. So every time you run it, you'll get exactly the same jump. Highly recommended. Okie dokie, what is next? We talked about conditional coloration. We didn't talk about timecode chasing. So when a queue list is triggering off of timecode, it now synchronizes. If timecode tracks ahead, any timecode triggered queues also track ahead. If timecode pauses, you can set QLab to optionally pause, stop, or ignore the stopped timecode. And there's freewheel time here. So for those of you who use QLab following along to a media server or some other source of timecode, this should be an improvement. The next bit that I wanted to talk about, I alluded to earlier, was network device definitions. So in network settings, the type of patch, the type menu has been added to each patch. You can have a regular OSC message or a plain text message, but we've also added hexadecimal codes for those of you who need to output hexadecimal. Mostly folks who are controlling video gear seems to love hexadecimal. We also have a special network type for all of these devices. So if you are remote controlling an EOS or Creative Commons SpikeMark or Camsys Magic Q or a Yamaha Rivage console or any of these things, the OSC library of that device is built into QLab. Well, what that means practically is here's an EOS queue. I've set it to a patch that's set to the EOS family. And instead of the regular text field in OSC queue, in network queues where you type in OSC, it's a series of menus and controls where I can say, what kind of message do I want? I want a queue type message. I want to run a queue in a specific list. It's list 2, it's Q53, and then QLab automatically formulates the appropriate OSC message. Here's a Meyer Galaxy. I've got this queue set to an input processing type message. On input A, turn mute on. Here's a ELISA queue, which sends source parameters all combined. And you can select these things to be fadeable optionally. Some of them, those that are applicable. The DS100 queue, this DS100 patch, like network patch mode, we talked about the group queue playlist mode a little bit earlier on. An individual mentioned that they were fond of it. Here is a playlist mode group queue. It's got an orange border, and it's got a playlist tab in the inspector that lets you set some things. So this particular example of a playlist group contains infinite length queues, queues that don't have a specific length, and it's set to manually advance if running a second trigger plays next in the triggers tab. So when I hit go on this queue, it advances the queue. The second example of a playlist group queue, its queues have directives and for walk-in music, but it can also be useful for things like lighting effects, having a loop of lighting events, or it can be used for sending a series of messages to connected hardware using MIDI or OSC. We have a question from Aaron M. Sorry if something along these lines has already been asked, but besides NDI video output, are any other streaming protocols supported for output? No. We can output video through native GPU outputs. So if you plug a monitor straight into your Mac, that's one way. We support Blackmagic hardware, both their USB and Thunderbolt connected hardware, as well as their PCI cards. And we support Siphon out, which sends video out to another piece of software on the same Mac. And we support NDI out. And those are the ways video can get out of QLab. Alrighty. I want to talk about Audition mode next. In QLab 4, when you turn Audition mode on by opening the Audition window, all QLab output for video and for audio is rerouted through that window. Spencer says, do shuffling playlists reshuffle every time you hit go? They reshuffle every time you hit go after they're started the first time. So that's a bad way to say that. Let me try this again. When a playlist group, a group set to playlist can be set to auto shuffle. And every time the group is started or loaded when the group is not running, and then you load it or start it, it shuffles right then. That's what I should have said the first time, but I got myself tongue-tied. So yes, you can shuffle the group queue. You shuffle the group queue by starting it or by loading it. Okay, Audition mode. So one of the limitations of QLab 4's Audition mode that I found sort of frustrating to use was that if I have multiple video outputs, the one audition window didn't allow me to arrange my video output auditions in a way that made sense for how they were arranged in real space. So if I have 3 video outputs from QLab and one's my stage left screen, one's my center screen, and one's my stage right screen, QLab doesn't necessarily know that that's how they're meant to be arranged. It just puts the first cue up leftmost in the audition window. So now, instead, what happens in QLab 5 is that each output has its own audition window. So right now, this here says audition output for Hello World. Hello World is the name of the video stage. It's what we call them in QLab 5, stages. video output stages, I called it Hello World. If I created a new video stage and I sent other cues to this stage 2 would have its own audition window, and I can arrange the audition windows on screen however I like to make it easy for me to sort of simulate my output. The other big thing about Audition that's different is that when you audition a cue, the type of cue that you have can, let me say it this way. Each type of output from QLab can be set to a specific audition behavior. So right now, when I set, I've got this workspace set up so that all audio output is left unchanged when it's auditioned, but I could instead have it reroute to a specific patch. Or I could have it set to no output. Video output is redirected to the audition window. MIDI output is completely suppressed when auditioning. Network outputs are completely unchanged. And light output is redirected to the audition tab of the light dashboard. So what we have here is a different audition behavior for each type of output from QLab, and that goes hand in hand with the fact that Audition is now a cue action rather than a mode for the whole workspace. So when, if you look in the keyboard controls section, you see we have spacebar for go and V for preview. These are the keyboard shortcuts. But we also have option space for Audition Go and Option V for Audition Preview. So if I have my workspace not always auditioning, I can hit the spacebar on my keyboard and a cue will go to its normal output. Or I can hold Option and press space, and then it will output to my audition window. So this lets me audition individual cues selectively on the fly. I can also go to the Tools menu and turn on Always Audition, and that's the QLab 4 type behavior where auditioning is workspace-wide. If you are running cues live to real outputs, and then you audition preview or audition go a specific cue, your cues that are running live are unaffected. So I can run some cues live, audition some other cues. When I could then run more cues live, audition more cues. If a cue that's auditioning needs to be run live, I can just select it and regular go it, and it will stop its audition and start playing live to the live output. So the idea here is that, again, it's very easy for you to be in the rehearsal room, working privately on headphones, and then taking that work that you did and immediately playing it out through the sound system or what have you. We have a question, from Niklas. Have not been using NDI. Can you set custom resolution on NDI outputs for LED screens and so on? The answer is yes. NDI supports arbitrary pixel dimensions, anything you like, although the bigger you go, the more network resources it uses, and I believe that NDI is mostly tested at broadcast resolutions. So I can't speak to exactly the results, but it is technically possible to set any resolution you like. Aaron asks if SRT output might be a possibility coming out of QLab now that we support video over IP in the form of NDI. SRT, Aaron says, is a reliable streaming protocol that is newer than RTMP, which is the most common streaming protocol I'm aware of these days. My answer is just because, like, we built in NDI specifically. We didn't build in streaming video support and then added NDI to it. So the question of whether or not SRT output is possible is sort of entirely separate from NDI. And if it's possible, I mean, I'll never say never, but right now, it's not something we're focused on. Don? Once again, email us, support@figure53.com, and tell us why we should be focusing on it, and we'll look into it. I'm into it, conceptually, but, you know, we got a lot to do. We have a lot to do. Very fond of it. I want to show you briefly lighting Audition. I don't have a lighting system hooked up here, but shot of live DMX output, but it's not actually live. So I haven't auditioned any lighting cues, so it shows nothing right now. I can snap the Audition dashboard tab to match the live tab, which I just did with this button, Reset from Live. So now the Live tab and the Audition tab show the same thing. If I Audition Go a queue, it runs in the Audition tab as though running live to the world, but no actual DMX output occurs. If you're used to EOS consoles, this is running in blind. Okay, and then the biggest set of features left to talk about is networking and collaboration. So collaboration is a new set of tools that we've introduced in QLab that allows more than one person using more than one Mac to work on one QLab workspace. If I go into Workspace Settings to the Collaboration section and allow collaboration connections, anyone on my local network can now join up and work on this workspace with me. If I open QLab, I'll usually see the launcher window, and the launcher window lets me open a workspace or create a new workspace, but it also lets me connect to a workspace on the local network. And any other QLab workspaces that are open on other Macs on my network will appear in this list. And I can select it and choose Connect. Of course, I'm alone on this network right now, which is on purpose in order to facilitate this stream, which nevertheless did not work that great. Thanks a lot, Comcast, or YouTube, or me, or whoever. But if there was someone else running QLab on this network, or if there were someone else running QLab on this network, their workspace would appear here, and I could connect to it. And then a remote connected workspace can be given three sort of levels of permission. Connect and View lets you connect, view the workspace, edit notes, and edit and flag or unflagged queues, but nothing else. The edit permission allows someone to edit queues, but doesn't let them move the playhead or start or stop queues. The control permission lets them move the playhead and start and stop queues, but not edit queues. And then if you check both those boxes, then you have full editing permission and full control permission. So I might have the show computer in the booth hooked up to all my systems. I might have an operator connect using a remote with control permission. I might have my associate designer connect with edit permission only. And then I might have the designer, particularly during previews, attached with connect and view permission only, so that they can just check things out, watch the show go by, but can't accidentally run queues during a performance. When you connect to a workspace remotely, it shows with a purple toolbar and essentially looks just like a regular QLab workspace. It's got a purple toolbar and a purple highlight ring around the Go button to help you remember that you're looking at something remote. And in this remote state, everyone has their own undo history, except everyone's lighting dashboard remote undo history is combined. And the undo histories for queue lists and for settings are separated. It's something odd, but technically necessary. The one thing that comes, the cost to that is that adding, deleting, and moving queues is not undoable while collaborating. And that has to do with making sure that there's no way to put the QLab workspace into a state where two collaborators have different opinions about where a queue is. So this is something that's very hard to demonstrate on your own and hard to describe without being able to demonstrate. So there it is. We have another question in the chat. Aaron says, what is the behavior of Audition in QLab 4 in contrast to QLab 5? Does entering Audition on QLab 4 kill any running queues on the normal patch? Off the top of my head, I don't know right now. I think entering Audition mode doesn't, but I don't remember. And also, I'm going to stick to talking about QLab 5 today. Christopher asks, so you can designate a device/user a specific remote control. So when someone connects, that user on that computer gets a unique entry in this list of connected users, and they can each be given a specific set of permission. If another person connects, I can give that a specific set of permissions, and when that same person reconnects, they will get those permissions automatically. So I guess that the answer to your question, Christopher, is yes, but please follow up if I answered the wrong question, or if you want me to say more about it. That is the conclusion of my demo, which means all that's left for us today is more Q&A. I will cheerfully answer as many more questions as folks want to ask in the chat, but when that dries up, that's when we'll end the stream. Aaron asks, are there any plans to extend the network collaboration to offer native primary backup functionality similar to EOS? Aaron, you are one of those people who takes every new feature and turns it into a new feature request, which I actually delight in, but unfortunately it means I have to give you the same answer, which is we are focused on what we've just released. We are bug fixing, and the next set of features is the next set of features. And we'll come to it when we come to it. I am personally interested and invested in a native primary and backup functionality. It's very complicated to do well. Something that's really tricky with automatic failover to a backup is that making sure that the folks who are using the device have a full understanding of the situations against which the backup system is protective, right? Like on an EOS primary backup system, if you have, what that doesn't protect against is dimmer failure, right? Because it protects against console failure, but not dimmer failure. So as an example, a person who doesn't understand that might have a dimmer blowout and then switch to their backup console and then be unhappily unhelped by the failover to their backup console. So what we want to do when we explore this is make sure that we have a well-defined set of behaviors so that a person can say, okay, I've got a main backup system and a main backup QLab system, and when I switch over, here are the things that I expect this can save me from, and here are the things that I expect this can't save me from. So that is just a reason to approach this topic really gingerly and carefully and precisely. So it's something I think we will explore. It is something we are not at this moment exploring. We're focusing on what we've got, but we will. Okay, so the base price of QLab. Here's how QLab licensing works in general. In case you are not familiar, I will describe it in detail briefly. QLab itself is free. QLab does a lot of things for free. If you download QLab, start using it, and find that it does everything you need, congratulations, you don't need to pay any money, and you can start using QLab and keep using it like that forever. If you find you need advanced audio or video or lighting or MIDI or scripting or show control or networking or collaboration, all of those things need a license. We have 3 types of licenses: audio, video, and lighting. All of those licenses, bought as a bundle, costs $11.99 from scratch. But upgrade pricing, we basically we do in the form of credit. So any licenses you bought before are worth credit. If you bought a QLab 4 license on or after November the 1st of 2021, so basically within the last year, the trade-in credit for that license is the full purchase price of that license. So if you bought a V4 bundle license last month, you paid $9.99 for it, it's worth $9.99 for trade-in. So you can spend that $9.99 of trade-in credit, trade in your V4 license, and then buy the V5 license using that credit. And if you want to buy the V5 bundle license, you have to use that credit plus some cash. But if you only want audio plus video, for example, and no lighting license, that only costs $8.99. So your credit actually exceeds what you're buying. You get it for free, and you have credit left over for the future. 2 licenses cost $8.99. 1 license only costs $4.99. And then there's also rental licenses, which you buy on a daily basis. $5 for a single feature set, $9 for any 2 feature sets, or $12 a day for all 3. Rental license credit can be used for anything except buying more rental licenses, because that would just be a perpetual motion machine, and that's not how that works. So that's pricing, and that's trade-in credit. Any pricing relating to QLab Remote is separate because that uses the Apple App Store, which has some very specific rules that we don't get to have an opinion on. So that is the quick answer to the pricing. If there are any pricing questions, by all means ask. Eric asks, is there still a free basic license, and how does that interface with collaboration? So yes, as I just said, the free use of QLab remains, and the same basic feature set remains for free. Here is the way collaboration works with free QLab licenses. Thing one, to be the host of a collaboration session for other Macs to connect to you, you must have a license. Thing two, any QLab host, which must be licensed, can be connected to by any number of Macs, limited only by the available processing power on the Macs and the capacity of the network. One of those connecting Macs can have no license at all and still connect with full access, edit, control, and view. After that one Mac, any number of unlicensed copies of QLab can also connect with view-only access. So you could put the free copy of QLab on your stage manager's Mac, they could connect and have view-only and see the queue list, but not do anything to it. So infinite unlicensed view-only collaborators, infinite licensed full-featured collaborators, and one unlicensed full-featured collaborator. If your Mac has no license installed, no one can connect to you as a collaborator, even for view-only. You have to have a license to be connected to. Eric, please let me know if I answered your question fully or if you would like me to say more. Spencer asks, can you explain Always Audition? I sure can. So under the Tools menu, Always Audition can be turned on and off. When Always Audition is turned on, the space bar, the Go button, becomes an Audition button. If Always Audition is turned off, the only way to audition a cue is to run the shortcut for Audition or to send the OSC or MIDI command for Audition. So when Always Audition is off, by default, the spacebar is Go and Option space is Audition Go. When Always Audition is on, spacebar is Audition Go. Option spacebar is still Audition Go, but you don't need the Option key. So Always Audition is a mode that you go into when you want to make sure that you don't accidentally run cues to their regular output. For instance, I'm in the theater, I'm the projection designer, everything's going fine, and the lighting designer turns to me and says, hey, can you shut off all your projectors for a minute? I need to do something delicate and precise, and I can't have your video messing up what I'm looking at. I say, no problem. I close the shutters on all my projectors, I turn on Always Audition mode, and now I run my cues on my own screen, no problem, work, work, work. Then the lighting designer's like, I'm all set. Open all my shutters, switch out of Always Audition mode, go, 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 cues on actual output hardware, but then optionally, Option Go for one cue here and there to see on my own screen. Spencer, please let me know if I adequately addressed that question. Rolf says, tested NewTek screen capture HX software running on a Windows machine. It has built-in audio. It works with NDI video monitor on my Mac, but it shows up with no audio under audio input in QLab 5. Rolf, will you please contact support@figure53.com and describe that scenario to us? It's really tricky to test all the NDI permutations, so the more specific advice and input and examples we have from folks like you, the more we'll be able to hunt down every little situation and make sure that we've got things worked out. I really appreciate it. NDI is complicated, folks. It's complicated, and it behaves strangely, and it's very powerful. So, like, my hat is off to NewTek. It is the most impressive, but it's really hard to know exactly how it works. Thank you, Rolf. Eric says it's a very nice format. You look forward to it. I do too. Sid says just nice things. Thank you, Sid, for saying nice things. And Spencer K, can you animate a video cue's crop? Okay. In short, yes and no. Huh. How's that for an answer? Okay. So for folks who don't know exactly what he's talking about, here's a new video queue, and in the Geometry tab, there is a new set of tools called Crop. Let me give this queue a target so that we can see what I'm talking about here. What's a good... yeah, okay, fine, that's fine. Okay, so I'm running this queue here. If I want to crop the queue in, I can do that with these tools. So I can just like crop down to that little menu there. The shutter video effect has essentially the exact same behavior between having it both in both places, is that in the Geometry tab, this crop is on top of all video effects. This is like the absolute non-negotiable boss of the queue crop. Everything gets cropped. Whereas in Video Effects tab, this shutter effect could be layered in between other effects as needed to crop appropriately. If you want to have the crop inside the zoom blur instead of outside, for example. So that's the one that's animatable. The other one is a little bit more like, you can think of it more like trim in an audio queue, where it's just like an absolute, says, are there any major known differences to the AppleScript library? Are all my scripts totally broken? There are changes. There are a small number of breaking changes. If you take all of your scripts and make sure, I don't know how you address QLab in your scripts. The default says, tell application ID com.figure53.qlab.5. So if your scripts here say .4 and you just change them to .5, start there and see how it goes. Some select commands have been changed because 5.0 is our only chance to make a big breaking change. We don't want to change in the middle of a sequence. So like maybe when 4.4 came along, we were like, oh, we should have changed that AppleScript command to work differently. It would have been better. Well, we'll wait till 5.0 and then we'll make the change. So there are some breaking changes. Not a lot of them, but some of them. But start there. Just change that to a .4 and see how it goes. Niklas, one more stupid question. Not stupid question. Some people say there are no stupid questions. I am not one of those people. There are stupid questions. And I also say it is often okay to ask stupid questions. But also, I don't think this is a stupid question. When you're setting up a workspace and you're choosing physical screens or video switchers, shutting down or removing HDMI cables, then reconnecting HDMI cables, QLab sometimes says missing video. I go to settings and choose same screens again. Is that an IDE issue, or am I doing something wrong? Any changes, regular surfaces in QLab 5 to handle this? I assume that the whole example that you just gave, Niklas, is with QLab 4. And in short, the answer is QLab 5 protects you against missing video hardware better than QLab 4 did by adding another layer of abstraction, which we call routes. And I'll talk about that for a moment here. I open, get rid of that script. I'm going to open my workspace settings. I'm going to go to video. And now Video Outputs tab shows my stages, which are like QLab 4 surfaces. This is what the cues point to and play to and say, this is where the cue goes. Output devices are the actual devices that your Mac is connected to. So here we have the built-in Retina display of my laptop. We have the iMac that I'm AirPlaying to. Here we would add an NDI device or a siphon device. If I had a projector connected, it would appear here. But then the output routing tab doesn't have something similar in QLab 4. Instead of my surface, or in QLab 5 stage, playing directly to a device, the stage has a region. The region is this blue rectangle. And the region is assigned to a route. And the route is assigned to a device so that if the device gets unplugged, the stage is still looking at the route. And the stage is like, I'm fine. I don't know what your problem is, but that's your problem. The route says, my hardware's missing, but I can still receive the pixels. So when you disconnect your hardware, leave QLab open and QLab gets broken, you can just reconnect your hardware, come into the output routing tab, and make sure the device is connected appropriately here. Or if you are touring and you have a video projector in one venue, you unplug, go to the next venue, have the new video projector. That new video projector hooks up here, and then your stage, as far as your stage is concerned, is the same video projector because it's the same route, but it is in fact a different video projector. The route separates the stage from the output hardware. Hopefully that addresses your needs, and also hopefully that is clear because it's complicated. Darren asks, can you show how to fade in and out a group video queue? Great question, a classic, I love it. And the answer is yes, I can, and I shall, and we'll do it right now. The first thing to know about fading in and out a group of video queues is that when a fade queue targets a group, its fade type must be relative, not absolute. And that is because the fade queue cannot individually ask each queue within the group, hey, what's your current situation? Okay, now fade to this. Instead, it's just going to say, I don't care what your current situation is, add or subtract this amount. And the shtick is this. If I have a group of video queues, I'm going to use text queues because they work like video queues, but they're easier to just generate real quick. So we're going to set all these text queues to custom mode. We're going to give them different text so that we can tell them apart on screen. Text 2, text 3. Okay, they're all going to video output hello world. They're all set to custom geometry. So we'll start all three of these queues and then put them in different places. Okay, here's 3 text queues. Group of text queues. Now to fade this out, really straightforward. I select the group queue, I create a new fade. Fade queues come into being targeting whatever was selected when they were created. So it automatically targets the group of text queues. I go to the Geometry tab, I turn on the box for opacity, I set the opacity to 0, I stop target when done, and now when I run the group of text queues, they appear, and when I run the fade, they fade out and stop. So fading out and stopping, very easy. Fading in though, here's the problem. Relative fades are multiplicative when it comes to opacity because opacity is a percentage. So if I start this group of text queues all at 0% opacity and I want to fade it into 100% opacity, start it at 0, multiply 0 by 100%, turns out you still have 0. There is in fact, it turns out, no number by 0% opacity in order to get a productive number. So what do? Here's what we do. We take the 3 text queues and instead of 0% opacity, we set them to 1% opacity. When I roll these queues at 1% opacity, they are still effectively invisible because 1% opacity is not enough. 1% is 100%. So now I start the group. The 3 queues all start rolling at 1% opacity. Nobody sees anything, big secret. Now I roll my fade in and up they come to 100% opacity. And that is how to fade in a group of video queues with a single fade queue. Aaron asks, I just saw that my stream chopped again, and I hope that it didn't chop unacceptably during that demo because I was really pleased with how I did it. Darren, please let me know if you feel like your question was answered appropriately. Okie dokie. Aaron says, could the backup seat of a license be used for a second Mac to connect for network collaboration? Okay. Aaron said it chopped up a lot, I hate to say. I also hate to say. All right. I'm sorry. Darren, if you feel like you want more explanation, you can please write to support@figure53.com and we can do that down. And it says I'm back. Sorry. The question about licensing and license policy, can the backup license be used, tra-la-la-la-la, asked Aaron. But In QLab 4, when you bought a license, you got 3 seats, we called them, main, backup, and edit, that could be used for specific things. In QLab 5, the policy is now you get 2 activations, and you can do anything you like with them. So if you want to use one for main, one for backup, fine. If you want to use one for main and one for your tech table, also fine. If you want to use your 2 activations for 2 different shows in 2 different venues, 2 different theaters in your venue, also fine. So that's the new rule. We're hoping that that added flexibility gives people what they need to use, but please, let us know what your situation is if you find that that doesn't address it. Where are we now in the questions? Sid asks, sub-faders on cues work only absolutely, it causes jumps. That is correct. Right now, we have made no changes to the way that subs work in lighting. We've made no functional changes to lighting for QLab 5.0. We made the sort of strategy decision to focus on a fixed set of features and a relatively fixed launch date. And then that's what we made. And then the features that we want to add to QLab 5 that were other than those features will be coming in a future release. So we'll be putting some attention into lighting for a future QLab 5 point something release. So right now, anything that happens in lighting functionally works the same way as it did in QLab 4. Aaron asked about using collaboration over the internet, and Chris answered in text, and I will let folks read that themselves. Spencer, can a video cue be natively faded in without fade cues in groups, like in V4? No, fading in a video requires a fade cue. The fade cue is the mechanism by which fading occurs, and therefore that's how fading in works. And that's it. So we are currently sitting with no questions at the moment in the chat. Standing by for any other questions if you have them. And if you do, great. And if you don't, that is also fine. And I'm sorry for the eye contact thing, but that's where the chat window is. Spencer asks, does QLab ever need beta testers? Here's how we beta test QLab so far. For what we call landmark releases, 4.0, 5.0, we have a small group of folks with whom we already sort of have an established relationship, and we do beta testing with that group. It makes it the most straightforward to sort of have a frank conversation about expectations and for people to feel like they can give us feedback very casually. For intermediary versions, we sometimes have invitational betas. So we'll say like, hey, we're preparing a beta of QLab 5.1. If folks want to use that beta, if you're definitely going to use it and give us some feedback, write to us and we will put you in the beta. Other times we will just have a public beta. So here is QLab 5.1 beta. If you're running QLab for a show, do not use this. If you're not running a show right now, please download it and tell us what you think. And so for folks who are interested in being beta testers in that way, I encourage you to join our Google group. You can search for it on groups.google.com, and you can find links to it on QLab.app, which is QLab's website. And so that's the way to get involved as a beta tester. Aaron says, are the system requirements any higher than those for QLab 4? And the answer is this. QLab 5 requires Mac OS 11 or newer. Any Mac that can run Mac OS 11 or newer can run QLab 5. We really recommend Apple Silicon. If you are choosing between an expensive Intel Mac or a cheap Apple Silicon Mac, almost always the cheap Apple Silicon Mac will do better for you than the expensive Intel Mac. So I strongly encourage you to use Apple Silicon-based Macs, even if you can only afford or only get your hands on a comparatively low-spec one. I got a bundle of V4. Can I use both versions together in the same machine? You can, and as long as you're using QLab 4 version 4.7, they both use the same license. So you could trade in your V4 license if you wanted to do this. You could trade in your V4 license to get a discount on V5, install the V5 license, and then both QLab 4.7 and QLab 5 on the same Mac will use the same V5 license. If you want to use them on separate Macs and have separate licenses, that's fine. You can do that too, whatever you like. The other thing about system requirements is are just some like guidelines for best practices. If you want more than one native video output, it has to be an M1 Pro or better for Apple Silicon. The M1 and the M2 base systems only support a single external video device. Other than that, there's very, very little limitation on the base processor, and you're going to find it's generally performs pretty well. The base model of most Apple Silicon systems, I think, has only 8 gigabytes of RAM, and we found that to be adequate. But more RAM never hurts. So if it were me, and I were speccing what is the minimum Mac for an unknown QLab use, I would say an M1 Pro or M1 Max processor with 16 or 30. Aaron M asks, are there any Dante virtuals? The way to use Dante with QLab, and it works really well, so I recommend it. It's a separate purchase. You buy it from Audinate, not from us. And when DVS is running on your Mac, you can have a 4x4 up to, I think, 32 by 32 virtual audio interface that QLab can use, and that is it. Nicolas writes, M1 Max works like a dream with multi-surface solutions in high res. Just made a show with over 8,000 pixels on 3 surfaces, no problem in QLab 4. Yeah, the M1 Max is astonishingly fast. It's really impressive, and I've been really, really delighted with mine. Highly recommended. Okay. Let's see, it's 3:46 my time. I can continue to Q&A as much as you like. Looks like things are starting to peter out. So I will say, as of now, we have now entered the time where if I get no new questions for a few minutes, I will assume that we've wrapped it up, and then I will go offline. Once the stream ends, if I find that the YouTube recorded stream is unusable, then I will delete and put up a pre-recorded version of my intro talk at some point. Spencer says, thanks so much. And I say, you're welcome so much. Really appreciate you joining. I really appreciate your questions. And something I find very rewarding working for this company is interacting with folks who use QLab, who are so kind and generous to one another on the Google group and in sessions like this at the beginning of the session. Someone had a technical question about addressing an issue, and people were jumping in with proposals for how to address their issue. And that is something that you just don't see every day. And it's something that we really, really appreciate. And so I want to thank all of you for chiming in and being so kind and giving to one another in this live stream and on the Google group. Thanks a lot from Basque Country. Oh, how I would love to come visit you there. Perhaps the next live stream will be from Basque Country, right? Aaron M, will there be more videos coming on the channel from now since you've not uploaded any since 2020? Yeah, what happened in 2020? Was there anything that interrupted people's regular way of doing stuff? I can't think of anything. Yes, once we started working on QLab 5, which was in 2020, well, it's when we started really in earnest, we were also not coming, everyone was working from home, not everyone was set up to do video making, so we put a pause on making new videos until QLab 5 was out. Now that it's out, it is our intention to post more often, to post tutorial videos. Anything that we create will be posted in our channel at QLab.tv, and anything that is sort of tutorial-like in nature will be posted in the documentation in the tutorial section. You can find the manual for QLab at qlab.tips, or if you're feeling cranky, you can visit qlab.wtf. We'll take you to the same place. And the tutorials section has downloadable examples and will have tutorial videos as we create them. But they take a long time to make well anyway. And so we don't expect them to come fast, but do expect them to come at all. And it's something that we're committed to doing more of in the future. Alrighty. I guess I'm going to call this last call for questions. And I'm going to wait the awkward 20 seconds or so of lag time between me saying last call for questions and anything appearing in the chat. And just sort of fill. Chris says, thanks. Sorry about the network issues. It is certainly not your fault, Chris, as far as I know. And if it is, we will have words later about what you secretly do with Comcast in your off hours. But, you know, the internet, who knows the internet? Nobody knows. Alrighty. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your time, for your attention, for your focus. Please write to support@figure53.com if you have any questions at any time or any suggestions or comments. And do indeed check back here at qlab.tv in the future for this tutorial or some version of it and future tutorials. Thanks so much.